we talk a lot about patients going to see their doctors and talking about cannabis, and the doctor's like, no, we're not going to talk about that, and don't talk to me about dosing, and I don't want to hear what you're using. And then we have Dustin Sulak, who has been working, tirelessly in Maine on the individual level with the patient to give them this care that's not just about a 5-minute meeting and a prescription and off you go, but actually working with the whole patient, treating the whole patient. So Dustin, I would love to hear your thoughts.
Thank you, Amanda, and thank you all for being here. What an awesome conference. I was already so inspired just being here this morning by the energy of DPA and what it can do to the whole cannabis field as we move forward. So thank you to DPA. But what I wanted to do with my 10 minutes was basically just share what it's been like for me and for my patients and the other medical providers that I work with, being on the front lines of what I consider an emerging field in medicine. We have neurologists and we have endocrinologists, and now we have cannabinologists or cannabinoid medicine specialists. And this is a brand new field. We have a whole lot to learn about it. But in the meanwhile, the clinical use of cannabis as a medicine is preceding all the data, observational data, randomized clinical trial data. What we're seeing is happening right now, and there's a huge opportunity to help people that are suffering today. So I started my practice 6 years ago after my residency training. I'm an osteopath by training, so I have the training of a allopathic physician, a medical doctor, but I'm also skilled in using my hands for manipulation. I have a background in hypnotherapy, and basically I see the body as something that can heal itself, and I wonder what can I do to augment healing, and what can I do to remove the obstructions in the healing process. So I started off mostly treating patients with pain and PTSD, and I started my practice in the same year that the program in Maine significantly expanded to allow patients to grow for themselves and to have dispensaries and caregivers and so forth. So then basically I was the only doctor in the state that was willing to certify patients for cannabis. There was one other, he was a faculty in my residency program, and his patient panel was full. And it took several years for these certification mills to move into Maine. They're still brand new there. So really, everyone that was getting certified was coming through my office. And I had to grow very quickly. I was turning away hundreds and sometimes thousands of patients a month and doing my best to hire other good providers to work with me. So 6 years later, you can see I work with about 16 other medical providers or healthcare providers. You can see our demographic there. And we don't just do cannabis certifications. What we're focused on doing is helping the community with the challenges that are in front of them. We know that we spend the most money and have some of the worst outcomes in healthcare in this country. Maine is no different from the rest of the country. We need cost-effective, practical solutions to help empower patients to live in a healthy and enjoyable way. So that's what I'm doing. Cannabis, I never expected it to take over my career, but it has, and I'm so thankful for it. So here's the demographic of our primary indication for cannabis amongst our patients in Maine. And that list is the list of approved conditions in Maine. Chronic pain is the vast majority of our patients. We have a lot of PTSD, and there's certainly some overlap in those two groups. And then the rest is a big mix of different conditions. And as someone that's really interested in health and healing, I've had this great honor to interact with such a wide range of conditions, more than I would as a general practitioner, because we're basically getting the cases that have failed conventional therapy. So we have 18,000 real patients that have real medical records that have tried the conventional therapy and have failed, and they've come to us to see if they can get success with cannabis. And I don't want to paint the picture that this is a miracle drug that cures everybody of everything, but I will say there's very few patients that receive no benefit from cannabis when they're using the right cannabis in the right way. Sometimes it's a little benefit, sometimes it's a lot, sometimes it's miraculous. But this is a versatile, safe, effective medicine that can be used in the general practice. I can't imagine being a general practitioner without it. I would have to rely on more dangerous substances to treat my patients. What we're seeing in chronic pain is incredible. It's what the harm reduction research shows. People come in using opioid drugs that are cannabis naive. They start using cannabis. They cut their dose in half in the first week usually, and often a few weeks later they're off of the opioids entirely, or they've stabilized their dose. They no longer need to escalate. The evidence is there from the animal studies of why that's happening. We're starting to see some evidence in human trials, but it's working great for chronic pain, which is such a common condition that has no good treatment. Opioids are great for post-surgical pain, end-of-life pain, acute pain. They do not work well for chronic pain. We know they make the pain worse. We need other alternatives. This is a great alternative. My practice has shifted directions unexpectedly. So about a year and a half or 2 years ago, when the news stories started coming out about kids with epilepsy, I was treating mostly adults. Now suddenly my clinical time is spent treating these severe pediatric neurologic cases. I didn't expect that, but I love it. It's been so rewarding for me, and it's in alignment with my lineage of osteopaths who use cranial manipulation to treat neurologic dysfunction in children. So about 2 years ago, I had a mom coming in with her pediatric, with her son that had seizures and had a little cannabis tincture and said to me, "How many drops of this should I give my son to treat his seizure?" Right? That's a very challenging question to answer for a clinician that wants to do no harm and has no idea what's in that bottle. So that prompted me to call my younger brother all the way on the left there, Clayton Sulak, who had just graduated college. He had done some chromatography work with apple varieties in college, and he came out to Maine and helped us start out tested labs. So now we're doing cannabis analytics in our office. Patients, growers, dispensaries can bring in their medicine, we test it for them, and we tell them what's in it. I think that we're probably the only medical practice in the world that has this inside of our practice, and it's just not only has, so there may be a confluence of interest there. We haven't made a dime off this. We've actually lost money on this, but I had to do it. I had no other choice if I was going to advance this field of medicine. So we've made some huge discoveries here too, because as doctors, we usually like to say, here's what to do and how to do it. But what I've been finding in this field that's most effective is saying, what are you doing? Now let's take our laboratory eyes and look at what you're using and how much of it you're using to start to understand what's working and what's not working. And hopefully we can better inform the design of clinical trials so that they get it right. Because this isn't just one medicine, and you can't just try it in one way in different patient populations. There's a variety of medicines here. And so just as an example, here's a few lab reports that all look the same visually, but they're quite different. So here you can see this is a strain of cannabis that has about 17% THC. If you look at the bar graph, it's mostly in the form of THCA, which is the acidic form. That's the raw form of THC. When it's heated, it's decarboxylated, it turns into THC, and that's when it becomes psychoactive, active at the cannabinoid receptors, and so forth. There's been very little research on the acidic cannabinoids, but I think there's great therapeutic promise, and I'll mention more about that at the end of my presentation here. So here's another variety. You can tell it looks very similar. This is about 15% total potency of all the cannabinoids, but you can see it's about half and half, or a little more than half on the CBD side than THC. So this is a less psychoactive strain that might be more appropriate for people that want to use it during the day and not get high, or for people that have conditions that respond to a combo of CBD and THC, which Ethan was talking about, nabiximols or Sativex. That's a combination of THC and CBD, and that's where the vast majority of the clinical research has been done on whole plant compounds. Now here's another strain. It looks, again, very similar, almost no THC in that strain, and half the potency of the other two. Even though it's got all those crystals on it, it's about 7 or 8% potency. So very different medicines. And when someone comes in and says this is working or this isn't working, we need to know this information to understand what's happening with our patients. So I've had a really fun time making some discoveries, not just about the different strains, but also about dosage. The third thing that I've been working on besides my clinical practice and the testing lab is a patient education portal website. What I found is that cannabis is such a different medicine, and it has the capacity to empower people to heal themselves and to take care of themselves and to produce their own medicine themselves. And I wanted to make this more streamlined and easy for people. When I first started, everyone was coming in already using cannabis. They just wanted certification to use it. And interestingly, a lot of them were complaining about wanting to use it without any psychoactive effects. I was surprised by that. And now, 6 years later, we're getting a lot of patients that don't even know what cannabis is. They come through the door and they say, my neighbor told me they were putting this green lotion on their arthritic knee and it worked. And I say, okay, let's talk about the pros and cons of cannabis in your case. And they say, what's cannabis? Marijuana, that's what was in that green thing that your neighbor told me about and why you came to our office today. And there's just people that are totally brand new to this whole concept. And it's nice. I think the change in the semantics, using the word cannabis and not marijuana, is very helpful. But we're getting people brand new all the time that require a lot of hand-holding and deliberate walking through the process of introducing them to cannabis in a way that's going to minimize their adverse effects. So that's what I've really focused on here, and then other programs for existing users. And that streamlines it, and I think makes it more accessible with legalization coming down the line. I don't want all these patients to have to come see me unless they really feel like they need to. The sickest patients will come in, they'll get specific dosing recommendations and titration schedules, but I want everyone else to be able to grow their own and use their own and stay healthy, not necessarily without coming and paying me to see them as a physician. So there's a lot that's going right in Maine right now. We have 13 indications. It's a good list, but it's not complete. For example, if somebody has agitation associated with Alzheimer's, I can certify them. If it's agitation associated with a different type of dementia, like vascular dementia, I can't certify them. That's crap. It should be the doctor's decision about who we certify and who we don't certify. We have 8 dispensaries in the state. At most, 3 of the 8 are making medicines that are compatible with my recommendations and have a standard of quality that I would support patients using. But then we have these 2,000 plus caregivers. A caregiver is someone that can grow cannabis for up to 5 people. They get licensed through the state. They pay $300 licensing fee per patient that they serve. And it's actually working quite well. Something I see a lot of is a patient comes in the first time and they get their certification, and then when they come back 6 months later, they say that they're working with a caregiver who's supplying medicine and it's working well. And then 6 months after that, they say, now my caregiver is mentoring me and I'm growing my own cannabis. And then 6 or 12 months later, they come back and say, now I'm a caregiver and I'm helping 5 other people. And it's a beautiful way. It's a beautiful way to support the local economy and to empower patients, many of whom were disabled, to actually get back to work doing something they love that's very meaningful for them. I've always been an advocate of meaningful work. I think it's one of the most powerful medicines, perhaps even more powerful than cannabis. People can grow their own. They can grow their own outdoors as long as they have a 6-foot fence. And then in Maine, donations are allowed. So any patient can give away any amount of cannabis to another patient. So if we have surplus, that can be redistributed throughout the community. And we have groups of people that volunteer to do that work. So there's a lot of grassroots community efforts in Maine. Oh, the last thing I wanted to say is I'm getting referrals from the mainstream medical community. And that's huge. There's 4 pediatric neurologists in the state. Every one of them sends me their toughest cases. We get referrals from mainstream pain doctors, even from psychiatrists. It's really coming along.
That's great.
So we do have some challenges, especially extracting, processing, standardizing consistent formulas. This is a challenge, and a lot of it was talked about, but it wasn't clearly mentioned that as we concentrate the medicinal components, we're also concentrating the toxins and the impurities that might have been used from pesticides or heavy metals from the soil, mycotoxins from mold growing. We need better extraction methods that actually clean the product while they're concentrating it instead of concentrating the impurities. And I'm also working on that. There's some limitations in plant weights in Maine, but overall we're doing really well. The Maine state is making revenue off this program, but they're not giving any of it back to research. So we still have our work cut out for us. And then legalization is coming down the line. Thank you to DPA for helping negotiate some of the challenges and having different legalization groups. We had a local group and then we had MPP, 2 separate initiatives that I'm so proud to say in the last month combined their efforts, and now we're working together for a unified legalization movement. And that measure does a great job of protecting patients. So some of the discoveries we've made, and then we'll wrap it up. Dosage trends, the safety and side effect profile, the effectiveness and the choice of some of these minor constituents, and acidic cannabinoids. So first of all, when we talk about dosing, we need to talk about what form, right? Because smoking, tincture, concentrate, all the different delivery methods can have a different dosing system or dosing strategy. And then also the components. THC and CBD aren't the only components, but it's what we pay the most attention to. So just to orient you, if you were to take one big puff of cannabis, you might absorb 1 milligram or 1.5 milligrams of the active cannabinoids. The dosing range that I found effective in my practice, based on body weight. Now, I don't think that we should use body weight to dose adults. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but just to put it into a scale for you, 0.05 milligrams per kilogram per day, all the way up to 25. So that would be like someone my size either using 3 milligrams total a day or using 1,700 a day. We don't see a safe, effective dosing range like this for any other medication in the world. You know, and researchers have tried to kill monkeys with THC, and they can't do it at 9,000 milligrams. So I'm talking 25 is the high end of my range. But you know what? This is a 500-fold range in dosing. And it gets even more complex than that because within that range, we have biphasic and multiphasic dose response curves. So this means with cannabis, more is not better. As a patient starts at a very low dose, and how did I figure out that low dose? Because someone brought in their tincture and said, I'm taking 10 drops of this and it's totally working for me. And we looked at it and we said, are you sure there's really nothing in that? there's like 0.5 milligram per ml, and so we tested again, and it's true. So now I start patients way lower than I used to after learning what I've learned from our laboratory. But as you increase the dose, they get better results, and then you decrease the dose, and some of the results, some of the benefits start to diminish. This has been shown in mouse studies, several of them. Here's an example. They were looking at locomotor activity and giving, this is the baseline, they gave a little THC and activity level went down. They gave more and activity level went up. They gave more and activity level went back down again. You see these multiphasic responses throughout cannabinoid medicine. It's not the rule, but it's very common. And then the other thing, this shows the emergence of a side effect after you pass the peak of that bell-shaped curve. Another reason why, as a doctor, I can't say, go do this, here's the right thing to do for cannabis. You know, and I want to say that's happening so much in the field, right? A caregiver or a non-medical professional or even a doctor gets a successful case, you know, has one successful case, and now they suddenly know how to treat everybody. Do the exact same thing. It just doesn't work that way. This is highly individualized, and another reason why we need programs that teach people to find their right dose, not doctors who think they can tell people what the right dose is. This was another study, a Sativex study that I just wanted to show, using a low, medium, and high dose to treat pain. This is placebo. So the pain reduced with placebo, but we got the best pain reduction with the lowest dose. And the highest dose had barely any difference to placebo. So it just kind of proves what I'm saying, that this complex dosing effect in cannabis. I developed a protocol to help people that were coming in using too much cannabis reduce their dose. It takes 6 days. People on average reduce it 56%, and so they're using less than half as much and getting the same or more benefits from it. That saves money, makes more medicine available for the community. That's all on my website. And then the different strains can change that biphasic or multiphasic dose response. This is pure CBD versus CBD in the context of a whole plant extract. And this would be pain threshold and rats. And you can see with the isolated substance, they hit the peak and then it diminished, but at the same concentrations with the whole plant, the peak of the bell curve, if it even is a bell curve, didn't exist at 50 milligrams per kilogram. So the strain can make a huge difference in these dosing ranges. Another reason why I can't tell people what to do, but I can tell them how to do it. I'm going to finish off with raw cannabinoids because I didn't believe it at first, and every time there's something about cannabis I don't believe, it gets thrown in my face. Mom came in and said, this CBD tincture is curing my daughter's seizures. And so we ran it through the laboratory equipment and it had no CBD in it. It also had no THC in it. It was completely THCA, or almost completely THCA. And at the time there was no preclinical or clinical evidence of any sort that this non-psychoactive acidic cannabinoid could reduce seizures, and it does so at a dose starting about 1/10 the dose that we find with the heated or activated cannabinoid. So it's actually more powerful in tiny, tiny doses. The last thing I want to share about the strain differences that complements what Ethan and Michelle were saying. So I had a patient that was using THCA to reduce seizures, working very well. She switched strains, and the new strain wasn't working as well. She was starting to have breakthrough seizures at the same exact dosage. So we got a hold of the two strains, and we wanted to see what's the difference between the two. And it turns out that the first one had a very high level of a terpene called linalool. Linalool is found in lavender. It's what can give certain strains of cannabis. It's lavender-like aroma, and it's been shown to be a sedative, and in one animal study, to have anticonvulsant properties. So it makes a lot of sense that the strain that was linalool dominant was working better for this girl than the strain that only had a small fraction of it. We have a lot to learn. We have a lot to learn about how to best use this medicine, and it's not all going to come out of any type of trial, but if we use our observation, I think that we can get there. So thank you very much.